Well, hello. We're back with another episode of the Enneagram in a Movie. Used to be podcast, now sort of video cast, whatever it is we're doing here, TJ. It's all going to be on our Substack at the Enneagram in a Movie Substack. We are going to talk about Enneagram Type 8 and three female characters from movies. And interestingly enough, the movies all have the character's name in them in the titles, right? So we've got Furiosa, we've got Jackie Brown, and we've got Emily the Criminal. TJ, why'd you pick these movies? This was your idea. Why'd you pick these?
Yeah, I'm really interested in women eight characters as well as women eight actors because stereotypically something that you see both in movies and in a lot of Enneagram literature is type eight is most associated with men.
Mhm.
And any Enneagram teacher who knows the Enneagram will not say all eights are men or most eights are men. It's just the reverse. It's like gender has no bearing on the likelihood of somebody being a given type.
Right.
But a lot of societal messages are
Yeah.
the qualities of type 8 are encouraged in boys and men. The qualities of type 8 are discouraged in women. So it can be harder for women to identify as eights, or if they do so, there's more baggage. And these just aren't stories that we see as often in the media.
Yeah.
But when we do, and when they're well done, they're wonderful. And I think we need more of them.
Yeah, and we've talked in the past about how the Enneagram Type 8 is a character that's kind of more cinematic than a lot of the other Enneagram types. This doesn't mean there aren't great movies about all the Enneagram types or that they're, not worthy of being depicted or anything like that, right? There's no value judgment here. But movies are about conflict. And, most stories are about conflict in some way, right? Man versus man, man versus nature, whatever. And eights are really good at conflict and, really prone to conflict. So I think it makes them good characters.
Yeah, not averse to conflict. That
Yes.
they'll get into it if they need to. And if screenwriter is being a screenwriter, they will throw some conflict at the eight,
Right.
and the eight will say, "All right, let's do this."
That's right. That's right. So let's start with the character of Furiosa and why Furiosa, and I think we're going to talk about both the more recent, I guess it was a prequel movie, and the original depiction of Furiosa in Mad Max Fury Road.
So yeah, both of those movies take place in George Miller's Mad Max post-apocalyptic world, which these movies that are all set in Australia. We're in the desert. There has been a nuclear war. Society as we knew it is devastated. There are pockets of people who exist in these kind of desperate, brutal bands. And they somehow have access to fuel. So they have motor vehicles and they have these kind of almost pirate-like costumes that they wear. And they probably wouldn't think of it as costumes because it's practical. It's like it's leather armor, it's
Right.
helmets fashioned out of human bones and skulls and things like that. And they have these over the top, almost like professional wrestler names
Right. Right.
because the landscape is brutal and it is very difficult to survive.
Right. Right. Just for what it's worth, I actually saw the first Mad Max in the movie theater back in 1979, 80, 81, sometime around then. I can't quite remember. And I was a huge fan of The Road Warrior when that came out. And I believe it came out in the summer because I remember going to the drive-in theater, a drive-in theater in northern Delaware, not far from where I lived, multiple times to see it at a drive-in theater. So I'm a huge, huge fan of the Mad Max movies, and Mad Max Fury Road, I think, is just one of the best movies, quite frankly, of the 21st century. I mean, not just a great action movie, but just a great, straight up, all round movie. What is your thoughts on that movie? And then tell us about Furiosa.
I agree completely, and you are not alone in saying that. I've seen it top the list of like
Mm,
an aggregate of world film critics
mm.
looking at the movies of the 21st century, and that was number one, which
Wow.
is pretty unusual for an action movie.
Right.
Pretty
Right.
unusual for a genre movie of any kind for the critics to say, hey, this is objectively good, not just this is a popular, well-made action movie, but this is an objectively good movie. And I agree. Like it's got all the things people would want in an action movie. And yet it's got like Oscar-worthy performances in it
Right. Right.
and special effects that don't slow down the action. Like it is The budget on Fury Road is something like $175 million.
Wow.
And yet, never once is it a matter of like, take a look at what we have done. Isn't it magnificent? It's more like, the action has started. Now we are in it. Let's go.
It really was just kind of a tighten your seatbelt movie and hold on until it's over, right? I mean, right from the beginning, it goes. There's one or two moments that aren't pure action, but 90% of the movie is, and it is brilliantly choreographed. The effects are fantastic, and one of my favorite things is the way they would weave in the soundtrack with the guys playing music on the trucks, right? Where you would, it would be just this sort of normal soundtrack, and they would close up on these guys playing the instruments, and just brilliantly staged. It's just a fantastic movie, and a great central character who's not quite Mad Max.
How do you mean?
Well, I just think that Furiosa steals the movie,
Oh,
right?
okay, okay,
Yeah,
right, right.
right. I mean, it's a Mad
Yeah,
Max movie, but he's almost a secondary character, as
yeah,
is the male lead in Furiosa as well. But
yeah, agreed.
tell us about the Charlize Theron version of Furiosa.
So yeah, if we stick to Mad Max Fury Road, we meet Imperator Furiosa, as she's called, as she is one of the higher ups in this conclave run by a big old eight named Immortan Joe. And he has his sons as subordinate, and he has an army of soldiers willing to die at his command. And he presides over, they never really establish how many it is, but basically slaves, people who are
Yeah,
desperate slaves, which I thought was an interesting take on a post-apocalyptic landscape of like,
right,
in these movies, people are either a tough, assertive eight or a desperate, cowering slave,
right,
which seems like a pretty eight-ish vision of how the world could be if
right,
things really go bad.
right, right,
Of like,
right.
either you got to fight to survive and fight constantly,
Yeah,
or you have to live on scraps and live on mercy.
right. You're either wolf or sheep.
Yeah, exactly. So it's pretty unusual for a woman to rise in the ranks in this. And we meet her, and she's missing an arm. She's got a prosthetic arm made of mechanical stuff. She drives a caravan, and pretty quickly into the movie, she veers away from their destination and is off on her own. And it turns out she has smuggled out five of Immortan Joe's concubine wives, who are just his breeders.
Mhm.
And her plan is to escape from Immortan Joe and from his entire armed retinue, cross the desert, and make it back to the place where she believes that they can live. So it's a very daring and desperate plan, and it takes a tough character to even conceive of this, much less have the courage to pull it off. So there's a lot of leadership, there's a lot of determination, a lot of grim determination, and of course, Immortan Joe pursues. And that's the story, basically.
Yeah,
It's, as we talked about, it's pretty much a 2 hour chase.
right,
Let's
right.
get away from this army after us. Let's follow them. And then at a certain point, at Mad Max's suggestion, let's go back and let's block their ability to pursue us, and let's take over the base that they have abandoned.
Mm, mm. Yeah, because the place they're heading to is the kind of green sort of Eden of her childhood memories, but that's gone now. And in
Exactly.
fact, the only tree they encounter along the way, one of the characters refers to as that thing because he has no sense of
Right.
what a tree is, right? And and Furiosa, as played by Charlize Theron, is clearly an eight-ish character, and there are certain things we see there. So again, we talk about the type eight in the Enneagram is what we call striving to feel powerful, right? Strong-willed, assertive, likes to be in charge, all these sort of things. And we see this certainly in Furiosa. She's just a badass, right? I mean, there are scenes where she is, physically fist fighting with Max and and other folks and shooting people and all these things. And I think the line that stands out for me most in that movie is when one of the breeders gets accidentally nicked by a bullet, and Furiosa asks her, "Is she okay?" And the woman says, "It hurts." And Furiosa's response is, "Out here, everything hurts." And that is just such an eightish view of the world, right? Look, life is tough. Suck it up and get the stuff done, right? So for me, that moment, as good as anything else, captures the eightness of Furiosa.
As an eight, she doesn't have the kind of over the top lustiness that we often see in eights, both on screen and off screen. She's
Right,
very quiet. And in the prequel, she hardly says a word.
right,
Like she's mute for a significant portion of it, which is atypical of the way we usually see eights. But at the same time, that translates to a certain grim practicality. I'm not going to waste my words. She doesn't have a catchphrase. She doesn't crack a joke after she's killed somebody.
right.
She's all business. Let's get this done.
Yes. Yes. And I would suggest that this character is probably a navigating eight, right? And, to your point about there being the lack of sort of an overt sexuality that we often, expect to see in some eightish characters, that's something that you don't see as much in the navigating eight character as well, right? Vito Corleone, for example, is the classic version of it, right? I mean, he's all about, taking care of people, particularly the women. He's got that famous line about how, women and children can be careless, but men can't, right? As he says to Michael. And so it's that whole idea of protectiveness and a a I'll say a contained verbosity, right? I mean, meaning or lack of verbosity, I guess is a better way to think about it. Whereas the transmitting eight is a very verbal person. It's Sonny from The Godfather. The navigating eight tends not to be, and they're more constrained in their sexuality than the transmitting eight tends to be.
And I think Immortan Joe is probably a transmitting eight, and
Absolutely.
Dementis, the Chris
Yes.
Hemsworth character in Furiosa, the
Absolutely.
prequel. So
Absolutely.
he grandstands.
Yes. Yes.
He speaks with great authority.
Yes.
He is a great orator. He does this to inspire, he does it to intimidate. And same with
Yes.
Immortan Joe. So the scene where the two of them meet and he's able to wrestle some power away from him and get himself acknowledged as the ruler of gasoline city or whatever they call it.
Right.
It's very much the meeting of two transmitting eights of like, here we are in this standoff and who's going to win.
Right.
Okay, we come to an understanding. That's like kaboom, like
Right.
the confrontation of two transmitting eights. Very different from Furiosa.
Right. And I think, and we're going to see this in all the three movies that we're going to talk about today, I think, is the navigating eight, and particularly the female version of it, it tends to win through strategy, right? Through careful planning and outthinking, outsmarting the more, expressive, dynamic sort of characters, right? So it's more of a strategy approach to overcoming challenges than it is a force of nature approach like we see in Dementis and Immortan Joe, like you said.
And one of the points where we see that in Mad Max Fury Road is early on when Mad Max steals their truck.
Right.
He has hitched a ride with them, but he doesn't trust them at all. They don't trust him. And then at gunpoint, he just drives away.
Right.
And then the engine fails.
Right.
And we find out soon enough it's because Furiosa has programmed it
Yes.
to not go past a certain distance unless she has inputted a certain code. And she just tells him that. Like,
Right.
I programmed this myself yesterday. This
Right.
rig isn't going anywhere without me.
Right.
She's shrewd. She's strategic. She
yes.
foresees difficulties and has a plan in place and is
Yes.
confident that, like, I've taken care of things. I know what I'm doing. This is not an
Yes.
impulsive plan.
Right.
Thought this through.
Right. Right. And we see, and again, that's something we see in all three of these movies, or three of these characters that we're going to talk about. Now, so we're also going to talk about the prequel, the Furiosa prequel. Say some more about that. So I enjoyed the movie, but I wasn't nearly as big a fan of it as I was Fury Road, and probably not as big a fan as you seem to be of the movie. So tell us about that movie and what you see as the eightishness of the character.
Yeah, I just loved it. I watched it last night and I didn't even have a memory of like what the scuttlebutt was on social media when it first came out. Like I think the response was mixed. It wasn't a box office hit the way Fury Road
Right.
was,
Right.
but it hit me in the heart. Now, one of the things that I found interesting in it is, as I mentioned, Furiosa is mute for a fair bit of it.
Yes.
Not something you commonly see with eights.
Right.
How many mute
Well,
eights? can you think of?
Vito Corleone was mute as a child as well, right?
Oh,
So
yeah, that's
yeah,
very true.
yeah,
Yeah.
interesting. Yeah.
And I was thinking, like, if I hadn't gone into this with a sense of her as an eight, I might have surmised five.
Mm,
Five is much more likely to be the quiet one,
right.
but eight and five have a direct connection.
Hmm.
And I can see that, like, her muteness as a child is perhaps directly a result of the trauma of
Right.
being kidnapped, of seeing her mother killed right in front of her, of being taken away, of being enslaved, all of that. So
Yeah.
it's a way to deal with that. And yet, what she doesn't do is withdraw and study or dissociate. She's practical.
Right.
So when she's traded to a Morton Joe and she's put into the area where he keeps his wives, and it's just blatantly stated that she will be taken care of and then she can become one of his wives. She shaves her head that night with a blade that she finds and fashions a wig, knowing that this will help her escape when she needs to, which happens that night when one of
Right.
Morton Joe's sons kidnaps her and tries to rape her. And when he's stroking her hair, she just runs away because he doesn't know what he's stroking as a wig. And then she slaps some grease onto her face and then uses that to hide underneath a bridge. And then is able to somehow, like when time passes, and then the next time we see her, she's made use for herself as, I think, war boy is the term or something like that.
Right.
But she's
Right.
she's basically a monkey.
Right.
She's got the agility and practicality of a monkey in terms of, like, when they haul up a vehicle, she can climb down the chain and climb all over it and jettison somebody
Yeah.
who's hanging on to it and attach the hooks to where it needs to be,
Yeah.
and does this very well. So she learns how to do things and she does them, and she does them very well. She's hands-on, she's practical, she's action-oriented, very eight.
Yeah, and pretending to be a boy, right? In the movie, right?
Exactly.
She's kind of disguising herself as a boy, which again gets to the whole stereotypical eight thing, being more male than female, even though there's an equal distribution and that sort of thing. But it's something we associate more with masculinity than femininity in that way. But yeah, interesting, and it's an interesting task that she does because the actress that plays the character is quite an attractive woman, right? And yeah, a beautiful woman. I forget her name.
Anya Taylor-Joy,
Yeah,
yeah, a former
right.
model.
Yes, and
And
so
same with Charlize Theron, like
yes,
supermodel gorgeous.
right, exactly, right. Um,
In both
so
cases, choosing not to present themselves in this way.
right,
But it also doesn't feel like I'm slumming it, or
right,
we all know I'm really gorgeous and I'm going to make sure that I look both gritty and gorgeous. It's like, no, no, I look gritty.
right,
That's what this character is. That's who
right.
I am in this role.
Right, which Charlize Theron has a history of that when she played the character in Monster as well. So
Exactly.
yeah,
Eileen Wuornos.
yeah. So all right, good. So what else about the prequel movie, the second movie, was eight-ish for you? Anything else come to mind?
Something we have talked about, and I'm sure we will talk about again in terms of type 8, revenge.
Yeah.
This is a story of revenge.
Mm.
So she is kidnapped by a subordinate at the beginning of the movie of Dementis, played by Chris Hemsworth, who's kind of the leader of a biker gang, for lack of a better term, a group of survivors who are all bikers. And he, of course, rides this chariot powered by three
Right.
motorcycles that are riderless. It's
Right.
so over the top, it's amazing. But he's the one that has also this gentleness. He doesn't try and
Right.
coerce the location where she comes from by force. He does it by gentleness, but she
Right.
sees through him.
Right.
And then he's the one that ultimately captures, tortures, and murders her mother. And she never forgets that. She never, like,
Right.
acclimatizes herself to the fact that, like, you know what? If I want to survive, I need to be okay with this guy.
Mm-hmm.
She keeps that fire burning for more than a decade
Yeah.
of, like, I despise this man, I will kill him, and I will enjoy doing it.
Right.
That's the story of Furiosa.
Right. Right. Yeah, that's interesting because you're absolutely right. It is a vengeance movie to a large extent. So, which again is one of the central themes of the eight. It's funny. Before he died, Claudio Naranjo, I saw him in a video where he was talking about how he no longer thought that vengeance was the key issue of the Type Eight. That it was something else. I don't remember. And I just remember thinking, yeah, no, it is. Yeah, take my word for it. It is all about vengeance, So, and it's a theme that we see over and over again in movies about type 8s.
including Fury Road, because
Yes.
the climax of Fury Road, she kills Immortan Joe.
Yes.
So in Furiosa, she is kind of bartered to Immortan Joe because he sees her and like, who's this?
Right.
And is able to assess like, this is somebody I want. She's young, she's
Right.
beautiful, she's healthy, she's fertile, she's a virgin, et cetera, et cetera. And then she's able to escape and become this monkey basically.
Right.
But then her femininity is eventually revealed, and she rises through the ranks, but she never forgives him either.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're brutal. You are a rapist. You're an enslaver. You're a despot, and I won't forgive any of that.
Right. Right.
And
It,
she kills him personally. And when she does, her line to him is something like, "Remember me?" And she throws his mask over the rear wheels of the vehicle, which gets it caught up and rips it off his face, which is what kills him.
right.
He didn't need to say that, but it's just a good sting of revenge of
Right.
like, you're about to die, and look who's doing it.
Right. Right. There's also a theme that came out when we talked about the last girl or the final girl trope of the guy that you think is going to be the hero, but ends up falling short, whereas the woman steps up and is stronger and vanquishes the monster. Okay, so you see that in a lot of the kind of horror movies we talked about, but there's a version of that in both Mad Max and Furiosa, right? So again, Mad Max in the Fury Road is not. I mean, he's not a failure necessarily, but again, it's really the Furiosa who's the hero of the movie, and we see the same thing in Furiosa. There's the male character that saves her at one point, but then she ends up being tougher than. I'm going to see a version of that in each of the other two movies that we're going to talk about as well. So I'm curious. Anything else about Furiosa, and then let's move on to Jackie Brown.
Yeah, one more thing to say,
Yeah.
and we see this in this is the plot of Fury Road, is she's smuggling out these captured women.
Hmm.
And when Mad Max tries to steal the rig and she reveals that it's got the kill switch, like this thing's not going anywhere without me, he's willing to bargain of like, okay, just you, and she won't have it. It's like it's all of us or none of us. And if
Right.
it's none of us, it's also not you, and they're going to get us and kill us.
Right.
That's where we see the protector figure in eights.
Right.
It's very much like these are my people, and I will go to great danger for them, and I'm their leader. I'm responsible for them, and I will go into the mouth of hell for them.
Yeah. Yeah. Great. All right, very good. So, Furiosa. Now, again, both of those movies are certainly worth watching. Mad Max Fury Road. If you have not seen it, see it on as big a movie screen as big a screen as you can. I think it's important, and it may be one of the reasons I wasn't as blown away by Furiosa as you were, is that I saw it on a mere 70-inch screen, and probably didn't quite do it justice. But
And
sort
see
of
the black and chrome versions if you can.
that I'll
Black
have
and
to
white
look
with
for.
selective bursts of color, which is what George Miller intended in the first place, and it is glorious.